welcoming you to a life of awareness. The Presence Project is excited for you to join us for today's podcast with your host, Paul Kerzner.
Hello and welcome to episode 55 of Are You Being Present? My name is Paul Kerzner. I want to welcome you to the present moment. I want to welcome you to the here and now. And I want to thank you wholeheartedly, sincerely, and deeply for joining me in this amazing present moment. The title and topic of today's podcast is Acceptance of the Present Moment, Part 2. I was reflecting back to some of the previous podcasts that I've completed, and I thought about which ones would warrant a continuation. And without a doubt, it was definitely number 9. I truly believe that acceptance is one of the most important, one of the most pivotal presence tools that you can use, that I can use in any given moment. Because without acceptance, resistance shows up. And of course, when we resist, what we resist tends to persist. That's just not a cliche, that's actually a truth. Because what we push against, what we don't like, especially if we're putting energy and attention towards it, we bring more of that forward, and that's not desirable at all. I recorded episode 9 a good few years ago, and, my circumstances in those moments were definitely subjective and unique to the things that were unfolding for me and not to me. And that's always an important perspective. And it's important to remember that life does happen for you, it doesn't happen to you. That way, you don't have to take a victim role. You could take a more engaging role because, it's happening with your best interests in mind, even if it doesn't feel good. And that's something that acceptance will allow for. Because in any given moment, whatever's happening, whatever's taking place, if you can accept it, regardless of how you feel about it, and that's really important. This is a really important point here. How you feel about a situation, a person, place, or thing will only complicate the matter. And you are certainly entitled to feel how you want to feel about a situation in the present moment. But it's really important that, first and foremost, we can get into a state of acceptance. When we get into a state of acceptance, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're condoning a situation at all. We're not. But we're allowing it to flow so that there's a beginning, middle, and end to the experience itself. If you don't use acceptance as a presence tool, resistance takes place. And resistance is a tremendous presence obstacle. The more that we resist, the more self-inflicted suffering takes place. And that is not productive for anyone, and it certainly doesn't allow for presence. And oftentimes when we're being resistant, we're reflecting back to the past or shooting ourselves into the future. And that takes us right out of the moment. And I know that, there's certainly certain circumstances and situations, people, places, and things that it could be very difficult at times to be accepting of. Because, why would I want to accept this thing that's making me feel bad? And, that is a good question. And it's certainly one that, makes sense logically. And we're not asking you to like it. It's never been about that. You're certainly entitled to not like it. But it is your interpretation of an experience. It's your interpretation of a person or a place that is going to create the suffering because it won't allow for acceptance. We have to accept everything for how it is, not for the way that we perceive it to be. And that is actually a really important point there. Because oftentimes our perceptions are muddled through an emotional filter. Also, our filter can be muddled with memories of the past or worries about the future, which inhibit our ability to be present and also inhibit our ability to be accepting. So, observation is definitely quintessential so that we can see things with clarity. And I just touched upon clarity and how important it is to have in any given moment and to not make decisions when you can see that you don't have that level of clarity. But clarity and acceptance are almost intertwined. They could be used in conjunction with each other. So the more clarity you have, the easier it becomes to be accepting of whatever's unfolding for you in a present moment. And the more accepting that you are of how things are that are unfolding in any given present moment will provide you with a very good level of clarity. And that all leads to a reduction and possibly an elimination of self-inflicted suffering. And you'll notice over the past 54 podcasts, I talk a lot about self-inflicted suffering. And it's, definitely a facet of this reality that is unnecessary. And it is certainly created and exacerbated by our egos. That thought stream, that negative thought stream, that negative talk that's going on, that can go on inside our heads that is fueled by the ego. It creates self-inflicted suffering. In contrast, there are definitely things that happen in life that there is a layer of suffering intertwined. And it's an important experience in life because everything's relative to everything else. We'll only understand suffering by experiencing the opposite of suffering. And so suffering is an important experience alone, for sure. And it never lasts at all. But it's the self-inflicted suffering that makes everything so much more difficult. That definitely pulls us out of the present moment. That makes things feel so much heavier and so much harder. And it's important to ask yourself frequently, is this suffering necessary? Am I doing it to myself? Why am I doing this to myself? Where is this coming from? What's the lesson here? Do I have clarity? And again, am I being accepting of how things are in this present moment? Because oftentimes it is the acceptance or subsequently a lack of acceptance that creates so much friction that doesn't allow for a flow state. And that's going to make for a very long, troublesome reality. And it's completely unnecessary. But it happens. It happens a lot. It happens to me at times when I'm not, really doing my work, when I'm not, using my presence tools. Yeah, my ego is going to come forward. It's going to try to trick me. It's going to make me think things. It's going to make me feel things. It's going to make me resistant. That's when I need to take a step back, use my tools, gain some clarity, but implement acceptance through everything. And yes, there's going to be times where you're going to be pulled out and it's going to be harder than others. That's okay. That's normal. Okay? We're not going to be hard on ourselves because we got pulled out of the present moment. We're going to be empathetic. We're going to be understanding. We're going to work on it. We're going to work on it with a positive state of mind. We're going to work on it and implement acceptance and say, okay, I accept this. I accept that I've been pulled out. I accept that I got spun out. I accept that there was a layer of self-inflicted suffering that took place, but I'm going to do my best to ground myself into this present moment. I'm going to use all my tools. I'm going to be super accepting of how things are, regardless of how my feelings are about it. And I'm going to work my way through it because it's not going to last. And nothing ever lasts. The beauty of presence is that we can remind ourselves that any given moment, whether it's feels really heavy or bad or sad, or it feels really great or amazing, it doesn't last. There's an ebb and flow to life. There's peaks and valleys. And if we don't want to get stuck in a peak, we're going to implement acceptance because we're going to remember the more accepting we are of that situation, of that person, of that place, regardless of our feelings, it will pass. But the more resistant that we become, the situation, whatever's happening for you, it's going to last a lot longer. And that's unnecessary. That's self-inflicted suffering. So, it's definitely a good question to ask yourself is, am I being accepting of what's happening for me right now? And if the answer is no, then of course, yes, there's an opportunity for you to do your work, to use your tools, whatever tools work for you. And it could be as simple as doing a meditation. It could be as simple as going to take a walk, being in nature, spending some time with a pet. Whatever is going to get you into that present moment so that you can gain some clarity and use your tools and definitely implement more acceptance, it's going to make you feel better. It's going to alleviate that pressure. Okay? Yes, I talk a lot about acceptance in clinic when I'm working with patients, and it's definitely something that I look at often within my own reality, because I can see sometimes when I'm being resistant how much harder and heavier things feel to me. And it's a reflection point. I do my best not to be hard on myself, not to criticize myself, not to allow my ego to get in the middle of it and create more suffering, because it will, always. That ego, it's so tricky. One of the biggest issues that we have as human beings is if we have an unguarded mind, an unguarded ego, there's going to be a tremendous amount of self-inflicted suffering that we're going to have to experience until we can do our work and become more mindful and become more present. And that's always been the goal here for this podcast series, is to help alleviate the self-inflicted suffering by using presence. And that question, are you being present? Asking yourself, am I being present? Asking yourself, am I being accepting of what's taking place for me, is going to break the stream of negativity, of self-inflicted suffering, of resistance, and allow you to get into a better state of presence where you feel better and you're more at ease. Yes, there's things that are going to come up. That's part of this reality. That's part of living on earth, is that you're going to have to deal with some challenges, but they don't have to last as long. They don't have to feel as bad. Acceptance is the key. And it's important to look at that as one of the primary presence tools is acceptance, period. And that's why I felt it was so important for me to go over it, to go deeper into it, to bring it, back to the forefront of your conscious mind, and to ask you, are you being accepting, or are you being resistant to the things that are happening right now in this moment, all of the moments that have led up to this moment? And there have been many. But a good reminder is that there's only so many present moments that we're presented with in our lifetime. And why would we choose self-inflicted suffering? Because if you are experiencing that, whether you believe that you have created it for yourself or not, it's happening. So, how do you work your way out of it? How do you see it for what it is? Well, yes, you have to ask yourself, am I being present? Do these thoughts have anything to do with the present moment? What's going on right now? What is it that I need? Where do I want to go? Is this how I want to feel? All these things are happening in real time. And it takes a certain level of discourse that you're having with yourself to gain that feeling space that you're really looking for, that you really desire. Because, another question you need to ask yourself is, what is it that I really want in this present moment? And you might not get an answer right away, but that's an important question to present to yourself at any given moment. Because if you don't have an answer for what is it that you really want, you're going to get nebulous results. You're going to get hazy results. You're not going to get clarity. So again, are you being accepting of the things that are happening in your life? And if the answer is no, then okay, we can work from there for sure. We could be supportive of ourselves, understanding. We can do our work to get to a place where we are so present, where we feel so fulfilled, and everything feels okay. And that's beautiful. And you know what? It's not going to last, and that's okay too, because nothing ever does. But everything's relative to everything else. So, you go throughout your day, and you're pretty present, and then you slip out, but you see it for what it is. You accept it more than anything for what it is, and you work your way back to the present moment. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful process. It's a beautiful endeavor. It's a beautiful quest. It's a beautiful way to live your life. And it's the definition of being free of being dominated by that ego mind, by that thought stream. And what do? We get into a state of acceptance. Okay, this is happening. What do I want to do about it now? And it is that perspective, it is that perception that will alleviate the self-inflicted suffering. And I want to repeat that. Okay, something happens for you. your first response, your only response is, okay, this is happening. What do I want to do about it now? Because if you can greet that moment in that way, first of all, you're being accepting of what's happening. So you're alleviating the resistance. And subsequently, you're alleviating the self-inflicted suffering that follows with the resistance. And so you're allowing that moment to flow through. Yes, it might not be the most desirable moment. Yes, it might not feel good. You might not like it. But again, like, this whole thing is not about whether you like it or not. It's about how accepting you are of what's being presented for you, because it's an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity for reflection. It's an opportunity to live in the moment. And that's why acceptance is so very important. So I hope this podcast was a good refresher, a reminder for sure, because acceptance is that important. And it's so easy to do. You can implement it in every different facet of your reality, and it will provide you with the relief that you so badly want. So I just want to take this present moment to thank Ron Klein over at Best Choice Media. He is our very first sponsor, and we are so grateful for his generosity. And with all that being said, I want to thank you for listening, for spending these present moments with me, and I want to welcome you back to the present moment.
Thank you for listening to the Are You Being Present podcast, brought to you by the Presence Projects. Remember, you have a choice. Choose to be present.